Just wanna love you, just wanna hold you, just wanna be with you till we grow old.
Welcome everyone to the continuation of our story, Unbreakable Bond, Episode 2, Love, Family and Betrayal. Lady Margaret returned to Oakfield late in the afternoon and found everything Isabella had prepared for the dinner party that evening. Lady Margaret was about to retire to her room and rest before dinner when Isabella asked about the trip to London. "Very positive and very informative trip. The lawyer had everything ready for me," said Lady Margaret. "Wake me in 2 hours, please, Isabella. I need to talk with you before our guests arrive at 7:30 this evening." Lady Margaret then turned and entered her room. Meanwhile, back in London, Edward was spending the day with his brother Charlie. They decided to go for a stroll in Hyde Park. After walking for a while, they stopped and sat down at a bench under a large tree. It was then that Charlie asked what was on Edward's mind, as he knew his younger brother very well. Edward began to tell Charlie about the gold mine and coffee trade and his marriage to Isabella on the voyage back to England. Charlie listened without saying a word until Edward had finished. Charlie took some tobacco from a leather pouch, began to fill his pipe, and without looking at his brother said, "So, little brother, you're now married. It must be real, for I have never known you to do anything without thinking it out first. But one question I have to ask you. Edward, how did you know Isabella was the one?" Edward turned to his brother and said, "Of all the women I have seen on my travels, not one has made my heart feel so full of love and happiness just by being in the same room as them. I saw in Isabella something very special and genuine. But why so fast in getting married after only a few days?" asked Charlie. This made Edward laugh and say, "What happened to the one question?" "Well, at the time after it was mentioned to the captain by Lady Margaret that Isabella and I were to be married, he suggested he marry us on the ship. The captain knows father very well and told me how father can be very controlling of people," Charlie remarked. "The captain does know father well." "Exactly," said Edward. "And I thought, why should we wait to be married in England when it can be done on the ship?" It was then Charlie asked, "When will you tell father about Isabella?" Edward looked Charlie in the eye and said in a slightly angry tone, "Why, he has never shown any interest in anything I have ever done since mother died when I was 4 years old." Charlie said, "Your lucky father hasn't prearranged someone from a wealthy family from here or Europe to marry you." To boost his wealth and power in being the biggest landowner in London. As he did with me, Edward put his hand on Charlie's shoulder and said, "But brother, you have a wonderful loving wife who has given you nothing but loyalty with her love for you." "I know," said Charlie. Isabella entered Lady Margaret's room to awaken her from her rest, only to find Lady Margaret sitting at her writing desk reading some documents. "My lady, did you not rest?" asked Isabella. "Yes, I did have some rest, but I needed to attend to a few things before the day was over." "Please sit with me, Isabella. I have something I need to give you and a few things to tell you." Isabella sat next to Lady Margaret. "Now, ever since I became your guardian from the day you were born, you have become not just my companion, but like my own daughter. I want you to have this ring. It belonged to my brother who died in the war in the Gold Coast. But promise me you will not wear it until the day of my funeral." "But why?" asked Isabella. "You will understand everything after I am gone," said Lady Margaret. "So until then, keep the ring safe, and also these documents. Do not mention the ring or show the documents to anyone. Only Edward may know, for he is the very embodiment of my brother, and I trusted my brother completely, which is why I trust Edward." Isabella agreed to Lady Margaret's request and proceeded to leave the room and to place the ring and documents in a safe place in her own room. Lady Margaret greeted her guests with a warm welcome, which always made her guests feel good to be invited. There was a quartet playing in the next room, with a few guests sitting and listening to the music of Handel. The butler entered the room to inform Lady Margaret that Lord Peterson had arrived and had brought a guest with him. Lady Margaret thanked the butler and proceeded to greet them both. "Good evening, my dear Lady Margaret. I hope you don't mind. I have brought my good friend along, Sir Arthur Lowings." "Not at all," said Lady Margaret politely. "Sir Arthur and I are acquainted with each other." "Welcome to Oakfield Manor, Sir Arthur. Please come and join the others." "Thank you for allowing me to enjoy your famous hospitality, Lady Margaret," replied Sir Arthur. All three then proceeded to enter the main room. That evening, Edward and Charlie were sitting at the dinner table, talking freely to each other since their father was away from London for a few days. "So, Edward, tell me, how did you manage the export of the coffee from Colombia?" "I made a deal with Núñez, the new party leader. The deal is for me to take 30% from the profit of the gold mine, with 70% going to the new government, but on condition that I was allowed a 30-year mandate to export coffee, 1 year for each percent from the gold mine deal," explained Edward. He then went on to say, "One thing father's friends at the club do not know. I now have a deal with Germany and Italy to supply coffee after meeting both countries' diplomats at one of Núñez's dinner parties." "That's amazing," said Charlie. "You always had a good business mind from a young age, Edward." "I am still concerned about the marriage and father," said Charlie. "Don't let it worry you, brother. Once I have finished with my business here in London, I will set up my new life with Isabella, away from father and his controlling ways." The two brothers then began to reminisce about their childhood and the happy times they had when their mother was alive. After dinner, everyone was relaxing. Some were playing bridge and others just sitting and chatting. Sir Arthur approached Lady Margaret, who was on the balcony taking the night's cool air. "Lady Margaret, have you given any more thought to my proposal to buy the land in Norfolk?" "My mind hasn't changed. The thought of destroying that beautiful land to dig for sand and stone, just for you and your friends to profit from others' suffering, by removing 2 villages in doing so, goes against all my brother held dear to his heart," replied Lady Margaret. This made Sir Arthur angry inside, but he did not let it show. He just replied, "Very well, as you wish, but there will come a time you will accept my offer." Sir Arthur returned to join Lord Peterson, but his lordship was busy talking to the Lady Sarah. Sir Arthur sat by the fire and drank a few glasses of whisky, which only made his mind turn to more anger. He then got up and went into the hallway and decided to go to Lady Margaret's study. Once inside, Sir Arthur started to look through the desk drawers and ledgers. He was looking for anything that could help get that land. A few moments later, Isabella entered the room and was shocked to see a gentleman frantically looking through Lady Margaret's paperwork. "Who are you? And why are you here in Lady Margaret's study?" shouted Isabella. "Be very careful who are talking to. No servant should raise their voice to someone of breeding and stature, especially a servant of colour. Know your place." Before Isabella could open the door to leave, Sir Arthur was holding her arm, pulling her to him. He tried to kiss Isabella, but as soon as she turned her head, she was struck hard across the face. She felt herself being thrown to the floor, hitting her head on the desk. Isabella must have passed out, for when she awoke, Master John was carrying her to her room. Isabella asked, "What happened, Master John?" "I heard shouting from the study and found you on the floor." John placed Isabella on her bed and said, "I will fetch Lady Margaret." "No, I will be all right. I must have fainted from not eating much while preparing for tonight's dinner party," said Isabella. John noticed the marks on Isabella's face. "Miss Isabella, fainting does not give you bruising the size of a man's hand on your face." "Bruising? Please pass me a mirror." Isabella looked at the marks on her face. She had no idea how they got there. The next day, Isabella made herself presentable, hiding the bruising on her face. Lady Margaret was already sitting at the breakfast table when Isabella entered the room. "There you are, my dear. Have something to eat before it gets cold." "It was a very successful night. I managed to get all the gossip while I was away." Isabella was just picking at the food on her plate when Lady Margaret said, "Are you not feeling well this morning?" "It will pass. I just seem to have a headache this morning," said Isabella. "Then I will have Master John prepare a herbal remedy for you. His knowledge of nature's medicine is well known." Isabella asked if she may be excused from the table, as she needed to lay down. As Isabella stood up, she fell to the floor. Never underestimate the power of true love. It will overcome all things when it comes to the heart.
You make me smile, what is it that you do? My life was great.
Isabella awoke to find Lady Margaret and Dr. Simons from the village standing by her bed, talking in a low voice. "Ah, you are awake, young lady," said the doctor. "I advise you to spend the rest of the day in bed." "Thank you, Dr. Simons," said Lady Margaret. "Now, Isabella, will you explain why your face has bruising and also why you have a deep cut on your head?" Isabella looked at Lady Margaret with a confused look on her face. I remember going into the study to pull the drapes across the windows, and the next thing I remember, Master John carrying me to my room. I think I was feeling tired after preparing for the dinner party. Lady Margaret looked at Isabella and gave a smile. Well, as long as you try to be more careful in the future. Isabella suddenly remembered a guest who she had never seen before. Who was the gentleman wearing a white summer dinner jacket? Lady Margaret had to think for a moment and said, "Oh, that is a friend of Lord Peterson, Sir Arthur. He is a horrid little man. He only cares about money and power. I was relieved when he left in a hurry last night. I think it was just after 9 when he left." Isabella thought for a moment. It was about 9 o'clock that she went into the study. At that moment, Lady Margaret said, "Isabella, you do know who Sir Arthur is, don't you?" "No, my lady, I have no idea. That poor specimen of a man is your Edward's father." Upon hearing that, Isabella felt sick, but not sick as going to throw up, but a sick pain in her heart. She felt like her heart was going to explode. Isabella could not understand why she felt like that, or why. Lady Margaret then said, "Edward and his brother Charlie take after their mother, the kindest woman I have ever known, and very, very smart when it comes to money and people. It was a shock to everyone when she took her own life by jumping into the River Thames one Christmas night all those years ago. I believe Edward was about 4 at that time." Isabella asked Lady Margaret, "May I rest now as I am feeling very tired?" "Of course, my dear. You rest. I will send Mary from the kitchen with some tea later." With that, Lady Margaret left the room. Master John went into the village that morning to speak with his friend who works on Lord Peterson's estate. "Morning, Jack." A man in his 50s turned round. "Well, knock me down with a feather. What brings you to the village at this time of day?" asked Jack. "I came to see you and to have a word about a guest staying with Lord Peterson." "Do you mean that Lowing's chap from London?" "Yes, my friend. I need to know if you heard anything about Lady Margaret's dinner party last night." Jack thought for a moment and said, "Yes, there was something. Maggie the parlour maid overheard that Lowing's fella talking to his lordship in the breakfast room about a servant who forgot her place and raised her voice to him last night, and he had to teach her to know her place in the world. Maggie said all she could hear after that was the servant tripped when Lowings tried to grab her arm, and she fell hitting her head on the edge of a desk or something. Maggie did say that his lordship said to that Lowings chap not to worry, old boy. It's the word a common maid against yours, a distinguished member of Parliament. No one will believe her lies." "Thank you, Jack. Glad I was able to help, but why have you an interest in the affairs of the high-ups?" "I just wanted to find out what happened to put my mind to rest," said John. "See you Friday, Jack. First 2 drinks are on me." "I will hold you to that, my friend. By the way, John, how long have you had a maid from the tropics at the house?" John carried on walking, pretending he didn't hear the question. But under his breath, and with gritted teeth, he said, in a whisper, "We haven't." A few days later, Sir Arthur asked Charlie to arrange a dinner at the Grosvenor Hotel with a table for 16. "I will need to know who is going, so the hotel can arrange any special requirements that may be needed," asked Charlie. "The list is on my desk. Pick it up on your way out." Within 20 minutes, Charlie had left the house to go to the hotel. Edward left early in the morning to conclude his business, and this left Sir Arthur alone in the house, which was Sir Arthur's plan all along. He proceeded to go into Edward's room and search through any paperwork he could find. After 10 minutes, Sir Arthur found nothing of interest until he saw a small case on top of the wardrobe. Pulling it down, he quickly opened it. He found some documents in Spanish, but dismissed them as not important. Then he found a letter from the Bank of England. Upon reading it, he had all the information he needed. Later that morning, Sir Arthur was meeting with the directors of the bank. All were from his gentleman's club, and each knew one another's secrets. So the power of their little society stays strong. The meeting went exactly as Sir Arthur wanted, and now he felt even more secure in his efforts to control people. It is the day of Sir Arthur's dinner. Charlie and his wife will be there with Edward, a few members of Parliament, and Lord and Lady Kemp, Lord Kemp's daughter Lady Beatrice, and his sister Miss Annie and brother Mr. Herbert. Edward returned to the house, but as he was about to enter the door, George the doorman said, "Excuse me, sir, I have a note for you." "Who from?" asked Edward. "The gentleman just told me to tell you, the captain." "Thank you, George." Edward read the note and proceeded to walk to the Fox and Hound Inn. Once inside, Edward didn't have to look for the captain, as he was the only person there. I took the precaution to ask the landlord to open early so we could talk alone. This sounds all cloak and dagger, Captain. What's going on? I'm here to warn you that your father is up to something that could make you lose everything. I know my father is always up to something no good. It's his way, said Edward. But how and why are you involved with this captain? I was asked to keep an eye on you from your friends in Colombia, and it was those same friends who asked the German diplomat to know every move your father makes. The captain was very serious when he spoke those words. I don't understand why the government want you to keep an eye on me, and especially my father. I can only tell you this. The Colombian leadership have an interest in you as you have with them, and they want to safeguard that interest. I think I understand now, said Edward. Now listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Edward listened to the captain talk for over an hour, taking in every word said. At the hotel, everyone was gathered in the large banquet hall. Edward said to his brother, "What is the occasion for Charlie?" To which Charlie just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Not a clue, Edward. I just follow orders." The headwaiter sounded the bell for everyone to sit at the table. After a few moments, the food was served, and it was almost 2 hours before everyone had finished eating. It was time for coffee and brandy. When the coffee arrived, Sir Arthur took a sip of coffee and said in a loud voice, "This could be the very same coffee Edward has exported to Britain from Colombia." "Is this true, Edward?" said Lord Kemp. "You export coffee to Britain from Colombia?" "And to America," said Edward's father. "Tell Lord Kemp about the gold mine in Colombia." "Gold mine as well. You have been busy making your fortune," said Lord Kemp. With that, he stood up to make a toast. "It is with great pride that I give my blessing to the engagement of my only daughter Beatrice to Edward Lowings." It took a few moments for Edward to realize what was happening, but it only took him a few seconds to stand up and say to everyone at the table, "I have no intention of marrying someone I have never met, or even spoken to, whatever twisted idea you are plotting, father. Forget it. I will not be part of your twisted plans to make you more powerful and richer." Edward turned and started to walk away. "Sir Arthur," shouted Lord Kemp, "you promised me your son would marry my daughter and we both will benefit from the marriage." Sir Arthur said in a loud voice, "Edward, once you walk out of that door, you are no longer part of the family. You will no longer be welcomed in the family home, and you will no longer have the protection of the British government wherever you go." Edward just continued walking. It did not take long for Edward to collect his things and stay at the guest house near the train station for the night. The next morning, Edward arrived at Oakfield Manor. The footman walked Edward to wait in the study, and then went to fetch Lady Margaret. "Edward, you're here early. What an unexpected and pleasant surprise," said Lady Margaret. "Isabella is in the garden by the willow trees." Edward did not waste time. He rushed out of the house and into the garden. He was almost tripping over his own feet. He was in such a hurry to see Isabella. Edward stopped and just looked at Isabella sitting under the tree, thinking how beautiful she looked and how lucky he was. Isabella did not see Edward standing there, so Edward walked slowly up to Isabella and said softly, "May I join you?" To which Isabella looked up and gave a happy, surprised type of scream. She jumped up and held Edward so tight he felt as if a great grizzly bear was hugging him. "You seem happy to see me, my love," joked Edward. "I'm so happy to have you with me again, my husband." After a few minutes, they both went for a walk in the garden, and they made their way to the house. Lady Margaret was sitting on the lawn with a picnic laid out. "Come and join me. I have cake," said Lady Margaret, laughing. Edward and Isabella sat down with Lady Margaret. It felt like being at lunch together on the ship, and it felt good. It was late afternoon when a telegram arrived for Edward. It only had a few words in Latin. "Al bellum incipit perdere vos omnes," meaning, "AL has started a war to destroy you all."
I just wanna love you, just wanna hold you, just wanna be with you till we grow old. Please tell me you're